Welcome everyone to today's performance clinic, Why Devs Love Dynatrace. This is a new season of multiple performance clinics that Sergio has volunteered to basically deliver to us. And not only volunteered, you said, I want to do this because I'm just very excited about development, operations, DevOps, SREs, and you said Dynatrace is so rich and powerful for especially developers, engineers, architects, performance engineers as well. But I think we have not done a good enough job yet to really show the world how easy it is. Exactly. And therefore, I'm very happy. Now, Sergio, maybe a quick introduction because not everybody knows you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sergio Hinojosa. Been with the company for over 5 years, and I'm very developer-centric. Before I joined the company, I used to be a full-stack developer, and I still develop on my free time. And I wish I had Dynatrace back on my developer time, because if I had it, I will have spent more time innovating and less time troubleshooting and finding problems, right? So, and this is something that I want to share with you for the experience that I have gathered through the years. And yeah, we have, since it's a lot of content, we packed the season in 4 episodes, right? And they're going to be building one upon each other.
Very cool. So just before I let you go with this, folks, if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. I'll try to moderate as you go through your content. I'll try not to interrupt you, but in case I think it makes sense, then I may stop you. Or maybe if you have a little pause, just say, and there are any questions, so it's easier. We'll have dedicated time in the end as well. Also, as a reminder again, that this is going to be recorded and you may even watch the recording right now. If you have questions now, put them into the Q&A. If later, please find our names. You find us online. You know, our email address is our firstname.lastname@dynatrace.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, also on Twitter. But with this, Sergio, please kick off the season with episode 1, Fullstack Observability and Distributed Trace Analysis.
Exactly. Well, why devs love Dynatrace? That will be the headline. Yeah. And today's episode 1. So let me just kick it off. This is going to be a webinar series, right? We have 4 episodes, and it's all about empowering developers, right? For you to find the needle in the haystack, to feel comfortable with Dynatrace, and really understand the whole power behind Dynatrace, right? So today, what we're going to understand is how to diagnose big environments, to find all the traces and code level visibility within those traces, and work with chains of filters, right? They're going to see what our filters and chains of filters are. The diagnostic tools, really good for developers. And especially we want to focus on feedback for developers, because that's really one of the most important attributes in software development. Then we're going to, in episode 2, we're going to learn what are intelligent quality gates, right? Because we want that you build in your company on a quality gate, meaning you push your code and automatically will be load tested, and it will evaluate it and compare automatically, right? So the quality of your software should always be constant and even better. And if something changed with full stack analysis, automatically we will break the pipeline. Whatever pipeline you're using, we're going to help you to build it. If something bad happens, then is why in episode 3 and 4, we're going to learn how to compare different releases, right? With the best practices of load testing, compare different releases and see what changed and find the needle in the haystack, meaning we're going to find method problems, CPU problems, threat issues, and find exactly the method within a big application, right? We're going to even decompile it and find memory analysis or CPU problems, okay? So this is, in a nutshell, what we're going to learn. So for those that are new and do not know Dynatrace, I just want to spend 3 to 5 minutes just to explain in a really super quick intro what is Dynatrace, right? So Dynatrace is a software intelligence platform, and it composes of 5 very important ingredients, let's call it like that. One will be the one agent, meaning you deploy the one agent in your dev machine, staging environment, production environment, doesn't matter. And the one agent automatically will monitor all the processes. These distributed traces, we call it PurePaths. We have more than 8 to 10 years of experience tracing transactions, right? Then these traces are going to be part of the Smartscape. The Smartscape is a living representation of your IT. right? You can have 10 hosts, 100 hosts, 1,000 hosts, and all the traces are part of this smartscape, where in which process, in which container, in which mainframe, everything's interconnected, right? This is why having Davis, which is a deterministic AI, if you push this like a multidimensional trace mesh, right, it detects exactly what is the problem and which users are affected. And last but not least, is the solution is made for hyperscale. So you don't have to be worried about putting database for your span and traces. This is made for scale, meaning you can monitor hundreds or thousands of hosts, and Dynatrace will cover you, right? So yeah, so I pretty much explained what I'm going to show now. So this is, for example, in a Kubernetes environment. So all your pods, all the containers inside the pods are going to be automatically monitored, and the technologies, meaning it can be Golang, it can be Java, Spring Boot, PHP, whatever it is, all the spans are going to be connected, they're connected, right? And this flows into the smartscape, right? And in a nutshell, this is what Dynatrace does for you. By the way, not to forget that also the real users, you can even see where they click, what they do, right? All the way to the backend and follow these transactions and understand what is happening, okay? So in a nutshell, this is pretty much what Dynatrace can offer you. And for developers, it's important to understand what is observability. And now lately, because of the hypes of orchestration platforms and microservices, is very important, because now it's difficult to understand what is happening in all these containers, right? So this is why traces, metrics, and logs are important. But we need to also understand the code, the topology, the behavior, the network. So everything in a context. And also, for example, Dynatrace supports OpenTelemetry, actually helping leading the board on creating standards for OpenTelemetry, because we believe in having an open platform, it's just gonna make the software better, right? And you might say, well, I'm a developer, what does really observability and so much more mean, right? Because it's some catchy marketing terminology, but for you as developer, let me just put it in some words. It means that you're going to get a PurePath with is an automatic end-to-end tracing. You get thread information, the thread ID of your containers, API information, first party, third party, you know, like the packages of the code, protocol metadata, client information, thread timings, log, CPU, disk IO, network, exceptions, errors, garbage collection, suspension time, meaning all the threads are stopped, and then it just recognizes this time that the JVM stops, right? Synchronous, asynchronous calls. If you're using queues, IBM, mainframe, it's going to trace all these transactions automatically for you. So you can concentrate and focus on your development, right? Now, this is a lot of things that we're gathering. This is why we give you also the diagnostic and analysis features, meaning you have features for understanding threats, threat profiling, memory allocation, process crashes, memory dumps, analyze CPU, like the threats on the foreground, but also what is happening on the background, right? Exceptions. You can even download the source code on real time. And then today we're gonna work with multidimensional analysis, a very nice feature that I like to use to understand all the traces and find exactly the exceptions or the traces that we want to see. And for example, our traces, because now we're gonna play with an application, right? So this will be in a nutshell.
Yeah, Sergio, one thing I may want to add to this impressive list is that all of this happens without any code change. The only thing you need to do is deploy the one agent, and the one agent either does the instrumentation, collecting all the data, but it can also, as you have on the left side on the bottom, we have support for things like OpenTelemetry. We can also pull in metrics from your Prometheus, from any other data source fully automatically. And this is why we believe this is a game changer.
Very good that you mentioned that, because we have something in that we call request attribute. It's more a generic term, but a request attribute we can gather on runtime without code modification, object information. So you as a developer, you might have a method and you want to get the return value, or you can access complex object like person dot username or email, right? So you can exactly get to that information of your spans without code change, only with configuration, right? And we're gonna actually do that today. So let's start with episode 1. Why devs love Dynatrace? For this, we have a goodie. We as developers, we love goodies. And the first goodie that this episode is gonna be having a code lab, meaning you can sit down and do the code lab on your time, step by step, helping you going through all the steps, right? I'm putting some links here. The performance clinic code labs is this address, Dynatrace perfclinics.github.io. On the left side, you're gonna find also some links for open source projects, Dynatrace OSS for open source initiatives, the Dynatrace Perf Clinics, and also a link about Captain. Captain is a project that we donated Dynatrace to the CNCF. And it's a way for you to automate deployment, delivery, load testing in your environments, right? And we're gonna use it later, spoiler alert, in episode 2, 3, and 4. So setting up the environment. This is all in the code lab. So I'm not gonna do this today, but this is the code lab, it's already live. So in episode 1, we have seen all this, right? So installing the one agent and easy trouble, right? So everything is here in the code lab. You just download the shell file, put your URL and token, run it, and in 3 to 5 minutes, you have a Linux machine with the easy trouble, Docker containers, and the one agent already configured, monitoring it, right? The environment that we're gonna use, it has already some configurations. For this, we're using Monaco. Monaco stands for monitoring as code, right? So we as developers, well, there is a saying that says, good developers are lazy, right? So we don't like to do things manually. That means that we like to automate. So Monaco is the automation of configuration of environments. So you can download the config and we do a GitOps approach. So you clone this repository, you set your variables, and you run Monaco, right? The configurations of episode 1 are in the project episode 1. And this will import for you dashboard, request attributes, application definition, automatic taggings, and management zones. These are really important features. I'm putting the links here because based on these best practices, you can monitor and find transactions in any environment. You can have hundreds of thousands of hosts, but having proper tagging, you can find a specific stage, namespace, deployment set, replica set, whatever you want to find, right? So, and once you run these 2 scripts, Monaco and spin up the machine, we're gonna jump into the environment. So let me just go into the environment. So this is the dashboard that we created for you. So let me just, is the size okay, Andy? Or should I make it bigger?
Yeah, no, I think it's okay. And it's just really, I want to repeat this because you created this code lab so that they just need to run the 1 or 2 scripts and then they automatically get all of this as well.
Exactly.
And this is the beauty, right? And this is this is why, thanks for bringing up the idea of the code lab, that we share all of this in a much easier way so that people not only see our videos, but can then later on also walk through all the steps in a much easier way.
Exactly. We as developers, we learn a lot by doing, by testing. So there you are, guys. Please use the code labs and give us feedback. We like to improve things for you. So if you like it or not, or what can we improve, let us know. So the first that I want to show you is how to diagnose environments, right? For this, I'm putting this dashboard with some best practices. Normally when I work at customers, with this kind of dashboard, I get a really fast understanding what is happening. In here, we see the request count and the 95 percentile of the response time of all transactions, right? For the whole day. I can see here the day, the last 2 hours, the last 72 hours, and I just changing automatically all the spans and the traces, distributed tracing of the environment of 10 hosts, 100 hosts, 1,000 hosts are going to be shown here. I see the amount of databases that are being used, service health, host health, application, the slowest services, the service throughput on the right. If you have errors, we're showing here the 400 and 500 errors. and failed transactions, database calls, time in database. Let me just put here the last today. So, and look how fast this is changing. We had millions of transactions. Right now, we have only a couple of 100,000 of transactions. This is really powerful. We see here the CPU wait IO log time. This is the time being spent of your traces in locking, wait, or CPU, right, in your processes. Okay. So, and now this filter here is a managed zone. A management zone means that you can create subsets of entities, right? Based on tagging that you already imported with Monaco, we can tag all, think about it like a namespace, multiple namespace with some rules. So as long as you add more objects to your environment, they're gonna fall into these management zones, and you can use them for role-based access and for filtering transactions. So I can say, hey, I wanna filter just Easy Travel, my Easy Travel application, and it's gonna filter and show me the databases, transactions, and everything that Easy Travel is using. The same for the bank job. The bank job is just a single container, right? And I'm filtering this container, the transactions, and whatever it finds here, database calls, CPU, memory allocation, only of this bank job, right? So you can have dynamic dashboards and apply the management zones and get a really nice understanding, okay?
And Sergio, because this question just came in, so this really works for any type of application. It could be you're running your workloads on Kubernetes, and then you put out, let's say, the namespace as one of these attributes, but it could be anything that you put on your container, any environment variable, any piece of information. But it also works on, let's say, any Java app that you run somewhere on a VM, or even, as you mentioned in the beginning, on the mainframe. And you can, if you think about what type of metadata you have on a process, on a container, on a serverless function that you're monitoring, then you can create filters. We call them management zones, where you can easily say, only show me the stuff that I'm interested in because I'm now part of this project, or I'm currently working on this particular environment. And then Dynatrace gives you, without any other code change, all the information that you have built here on this dashboard.
Absolutely, exactly. And a way to get this, to understand the filter better, I recommend take a look at the Smartscape. Right now, I am on the Smartscape and I can see the whole stack. So I have in this environment 2 hosts, right? Because I already have 1 host that we're going to use in episode 2. But automatically, Dynatrace detects where is it running, in which data center, the processes, the services running on the process, and the applications that we're monitoring. So, and if I change, for example, the management zone, say like, show me only the bank job, there you have. It can be as easy as only 1 host, 1 process, 1 service, or thousands of hosts, thousands of processes, right? And this is just by flipping the coin and saying, show me now Easy Travel, or show me all my entities, right? Really cool, right? So, and this is what I do to get an understanding. I see the entities, the processes. I also take a look at the technologies. Dynatrace detects the technologies automatically, meaning if you have a Tomcat or Nginx, you're going to see the code modules running there, the application pool, everything that is related, important to that technology on the process level, right? So, and the filter applies the same. I want to see the technology just for the bank job department, or only for Easy Travel department, or for all of them, because on one of the machines, you might guess, I have Kubernetes running, and there is a developer cluster. And this is why you see Istio, Envoy, the sidecars, everything is falls in there automatically, right? And by the way, management zone is a pre-configured set, but you can also search by whatever tag, either imported, these tags are imported automatically for Kubernetes or your cloud provider, right? Or the one that we define. For example, Easy Travel, show me just the backend. And there you have the backend, right? So it's a really nice way with key values to find and start to get an understanding of whatever you have deployed in your environment, right? So now that we're, and let me just show you the applications. In here, we have the applications. So these applications are also part of Monaco. So we have one application, one host with Easy Travel, and Easy Travel has two front ends: a classic one, a legacy one with JSF with Java server faces. I don't know if you used to program that. I actually did a long time ago, and a new UI with Angular, which will be something like this. It's a more pretty and responsive UI. Okay, and it has some load generators, meaning it's going to spin some chromiums and it's going to create some load. So you're going to see user sessions later for you to understand real user monitoring. Okay, but this session is more focused on development and traces, distributed traces. So this is why we're going to start with the diagnostic tools. Okay, so in the diagnostic tools, you click here in the dashboard or on the burger menu and diagnostic tools, right? It's going to take you to this. Let me just make it bigger, where you have a different analysis views depending what you want to analyze: memory dumps, exceptions, database statements, web requests, or CPU analysis. Today, we're going to be working a lot with traces. So this is why we start first with some web requests. So we're going to click here on web request. By the way, in the code lab, all the steps that I'm going to be doing today are already there with the solution and how to work with dimensions, with metrics, with filters and chains of filters. Right. So here, again, what I'm filtering here is the day today. I can change it for the last 2 hours, for example. And the management zone, I can apply it to one, or say I want to find all the traces in this environment, right? So the first example is failed transactions. So in the filter, I add failed state only failed, which means I'm filtering only failed transactions, right? And I see an overview of the transactions, the request name, and the service where it impacted, right? And Dynatrace doesn't only have charts, so every chart is clickable, so I can click and go exactly to that span and to understand the code, the process, and whatever happened, and actually who did or triggered this transaction, which we're gonna do later. So the next one is to find transactions slower than 10 seconds. So I take this filter, and if you see, I can type in and we have auto suggest. So you can filter by technology, by response code, by URL, or even timings of the thread, right? So response time, and let's find the slower ones, bigger than 10,000 milliseconds, which is 10 seconds. There we have. By the way, on the dimension, we have request count. So let's find out, for example, the response time to understand the response time of this. And we see, whoa, we have over 3 minutes of response time of some transactions, right? Very cool. And in the aggregation, we have average, but what about maximum or 95 percentile? And then we see, since we have outliers, we go almost to 5 minutes, okay? And let's just show, for example, the whole day. And we filter and we get a better understanding. So this is really, really powerful. So you can find those spans in your environment. Now we want to find transactions calling Dynatrace.com. So request. And it will match and try to find those transactions that have a request to Dynatrace.com. And we can see there are services calling the blog, the help, and www.dynatrace.com, right? And on the right side, here we have some actions so we can continue analyzing. So for example, who's calling the blog? I say service backtrace, show me who is calling this blog, right? And it's making an analysis for all the time on the spans that I selected, and it's showing me, hey, the bank service, 17,000 calls and 26 failed requests, right? And it's the method called check URL for execute job from the bank job. And I can dive deep and see exactly those traces. And I access this in 5 seconds, 17,000 spans, right? So
Sergio,
now,
just quickly, because this is a great use case. So I know this is your easy travel application that is part of your code lab, but if this would be, let's say, my application, and I know that somewhere I get asked that, why are you calling? We see outgoing calls to a certain service. Then you can say, well, let me double check this with Dynatrace. So Dynatrace, analyze all of my PurePaths for me, where I'm making calls to a particular endpoint. Could be a third-party service, could be external SaaS, whatever it is. And then you can even show me where in the code I'm making this call and when it happens.
Exactly. And even better, because we as developers, don't want to be reactive and clicking. So we can create a service for even things that we're not monitoring. Let's say we are making requests to the blog, Dynatrace.com. We can create a service and say, Dynatrace, Davis, monitor this blog.dynatrace.com. That means anomaly detection will apply for this block. It's going to start baselining all the traces. And if you have a problem with response time, failure rate, you can even select and say, hey, if I have a service drop, of service increase, request increase, notify me, right? So Davis works for you and you just focus on doing software and enjoy your free time, drinking a beer on the sun. So the next example is find transactions that so a single transaction that makes more than 100 database calls, right? That's a classic one. So number of calls to database. The database admin is always saying, well, all SQLs are really, really fast. But what he doesn't know is that one transaction makes subsequent calls, like 1,000, 10,000 of calls. And at the end, the user is waiting for a minute because they are synchronous calls, right? So bigger than. And let's see if we have. So by the way, in order to make this a bit faster, I'm going to change the time for there we have. Right. All this transaction making 113. No, this is the request count, number of calls to databases. So if I want to really understand the amount of databases each request or each span is doing, I just filter the metric here. So we flip the dimension, and now we're going to understand how many calls. And there we have it. There we have it. On average, 266 calls per transaction. We see the method and the service, right? So that will be the N+1 query problem. And the last one, transaction with lock issues, right? So lock time, we can put a filter and say, hey, more than 100 milliseconds. This means that it spends more than 100 milliseconds in a single thread, right? So the single span, it's been locked for more than 100 milliseconds. And if we want to understand how much lock time we have, we flip the metric, the dimension to the lock time, and now it's showing us we have transactions that spend over 7 seconds of lock time. 7 seconds just being locked, right? And we're finding this.
And this is, Sergio, I'm sorry that I have to interrupt again, but this is so great, especially for performance engineers, for site reliability engineers. We are working a lot these days with chaos engineers that are on the one side combining load with chaos and really, for instance, figuring out how does behavior change when you are enforcing chaos, like what happens if you're slowing down your network, if you are shutting down a particular instance, where do you have problems? And things like wait and lock are obviously classics. They will then lock your thread and therefore you will have contentions. And this, what you show here just gives you all the answers on where does it happen and where does it happen.
Exactly. Exactly. And you have so many metrics or dimensions. This is why it's called multidimensional analysis, because you can really understand and filter what is really happening because we have the context of all these spans. So now we want to see if we have database calls that are failing. We don't have, really good. Try it in your environment. Do you have failing database calls, right? Or failing transactions? For example, or finding out which is the slowest transaction of the day. So again, so we change here for response time, take the filter of failed out, and then aggregation, we click on max, right? And for example, we see here this select statement over 1 second of response time, but this is on average. So now we're going to click on the outliers, meaning we're selecting the select statement and show me the outliers. This is a feature of Dynatrace that is showing us for this select statement that we selected here, the distribution on the time that we selected. And we see we have over 1,000 requests, more than 300 milliseconds. So we zoom in and we see the distribution of the different requests. And we have even requests that take more than 1.5 seconds. And we can continue zooming in the outliers, right? And from here, we can click on the view PurePaths, right? Or the backtrace, which I'm gonna do on the next transaction, right? So for that, because this one is a really good example, to find SQL that had a lot of fetch count and row count, meaning the amount of data sets an SQL is gonna fetch, right? So again, we select the dimension fetch count. Boom, there we have it. This select user on this database and the EasyTotal business is making over 800 fetches. And by each fetch, let's see, not request count, row count. So it fetches 800 times, 8,000 times on average, right? So this is the row count per fetch, right? So this is quite interesting. And from here, we see the outliers. So, okay, show the distribution of this request, right? You can even go and try to, as an example, find the slowest one. And from this one, we can click on the backtrace. Who did this SQL that is so slow? We have 5 requests. We see the authentication service did it. From these methods, authenticate, get full name, loyalty status, and user roles, right? It came backwards from the front end, the web server, and EasyTravel Classic, and we see the user action, the click on the website, right? Or from EasyTravel Angular, the nice UI, from the REST endpoint login, right? So speeding up, now that we understand the database, let's go to analyzing exceptions. Right. Exceptions are also very important as a quick pro tip as developer. Exceptions are expensive, right? They cost unnecessary CPU and memory, right? I even remember there was one time exception-driven development, which is really not what was a good idea, because if you forget them to cover your exceptions, you're gonna have a lot of unnecessary CPU and memory usage. On the bright side, Dynatrace shows you and categorize the exceptions in your environment. This is just one application, and we see we have hundreds of thousands of exceptions, right? Categorized by exception type, by business exception, X is fault, right? We're splitting by merging the services or split by services, meaning you can create your backlog, right? On the ticketing system you have. So continuously you can make your software better. Clean out those unnecessary exceptions, find the team responsible, and create ticket in your backlog, right? And another exercise is an exception doesn't mean that the transaction failed, but again, we can filter by failed transactions with a failed spans, failed request. And here we're showing all the exceptions with failed transactions. So first you focus on the failed ones and then try to fix them, okay? So this will be a really, really quick intro into basic diagnostics. After this intro, now we're gonna focus on developer feedback, okay? Let me make this a bit clearer. So we're gonna play now the role of a tester. Let's just picture that we just got invited to work on a company called EasyTravel, and we need to test this application, right? Before we do the exercise, again, feedback is really important. So this is why you can use Dynatrace in your development staging integration environment to get feedback on real time. Create a transaction and get the feedback you need, right? So I still see this at customers where developers say, well, it worked on my computer. Yeah, but the staging or integration environment has a totally different database, totally different CPU, and doing the loops over there, it makes the application crash, right? So what we're going to show you now is how you can find your own spans in any environment, right? So you get the feedback of that span. Think it, one time a customer told me, hey, this is like having a debugger with steroids, right? So this is like Dynatrace. This is like capturing all these spans, right? So you can access them on real time. So you get into this company and you are asked to test the create account functionality and the login functionality, right? So in Easy Travel, you have the classic and the new stack. And we have in the new stack a REST endpoint that communicates with Angular, right? So we're gonna do a post request to the IP and this URL with these headers, application JSON. And as a request attribute, we're adding a header called x-developer, where you're gonna add your name. So with configuration, we tell Dynatrace, hey, capture all the developers, x-developers headers, so we can find them in our environment, right? So this is, for example, the UI. We're gonna use a REST. So I have here an API tester already set up. Mine has even already the IP. You're gonna need to put the IP of the machine that you spin. We recommend if it's a public one, you can use the API tester. If it's not a public one, then you can use Postman, Curl, Visual Studio, or whatever you want. In here, we're gonna put Sergio Perf Clinic, right? So, and that's it. We send the test and it passed, right? So this is the header 200, and we see as body, we got the JSON that the account was created. As an exercise, we're gonna send this account again, the same data that we have, we're gonna send it. Why? Because we want it to fail, right? We create, there it failed. If we check step number 3, we have this, the response forbidden. The email address you entered is already registered, right? So now our job is to understand what happened in Dynatrace, right? Before we switch into Dynatrace, we were asked to check the login. So we're gonna test the login, right? Same procedure. We have a test prepared for you. This is on the code lab. So on the code lab, Sergio Perf Clinic. Yeah, did I put Perf Clinic? I think so, right? Yeah, Perf Clinic. So it has to be the same because this is going to be used as email and password. So it's not the securest application, right? Just a test sample application. So I'm going to click test. And there it is. I could login. Login passed 200, and I get the response of the user, right? As easy as that. So now we go into Dynatrace and find our spans. Right. So for this, we already learned how to use the diagnostic tools. We're gonna filter by the request attribute developer, any value. You can filter by your own name, but let's filter by any value, right? So we see here some requests, but we don't see the data. Why? Because we can add all these placeholders as a text. I'm just adding a line, and let me just add developer. So I'm adding a dimension to my analysis, and I can see here Sergio Perf Clinic, and then I see Sergio Perf because before 2 in the morning I tested it again, right? This could be Mario, Peter, Julia, right? All the developers, right? And then even you can create a dashboard and see all the requests of all the developers in a dashboard, right? With a calculated metric. So we want to filter Sergio Perf Clinic, right? So we click here and say, hey, show me the service flow. By the way, I see Tomcat and Nginx, right? Why is this? Because in Nginx, in a container, a reverse proxy, it's forwarding also all the headers, meaning the Tomcat is also receiving the header. And this is why it's happening twice, but not a problem, because let me just show you. If I go into the second service and I show the service flow is going to be shorter because I'm missing what happened behind. So I can actually click here and say, hey, show me the backtrace. And I see we have the service flow. And this is the IP of the API tester public IP where the trace came, right? So from here back, you can show the service flow. And now I'm showing the service flow, right? So now pay attention to this because this is really, really strong. First, on the top, I have here a change of filters. You see that I have a filter on the Tomcat with the sign-in user, and we went back to one entity behind. Dynatrace is showing us the response time of 2 transactions of 13 milliseconds. And each service, we can see how the time goes down and the inter-tier calls, because it can be synchronous, asynchronous. So one service can make multiple calls. Everything is traced automatically. So we see the calls. And from here, the authentication services make 3 calls to the business, or 3 database calls on average. And you see the timings on each one. On the right side, if you click on infrastructure, you see where the calls are running and which instance. So if you have a container or Kubernetes and you have multiple of pods, you can access exactly those spans on those pods on that time. This can be in real time, but it can be also last week. And I will access the pod, the logs, the traces, and the metrics of specifically that time, right? So now working with filters, I'm just even gonna take away the signed user. Apply. What is gonna happen? The filter is gonna match the login, and now it's showing me the 3 span with an analysis for the 3 transactions. 2 account creation, 1 failed, 1 not, and 1 login. This is a very simple scenario, but still I wanna show how powerful it is that we can get the timings of transactions that are taking milliseconds in 1 or 2 digits, okay? So, the next step, working with filters, we're gonna add here HTTP code, or response code, and add the 200, right? Let's analyze 1 transaction, right? So now we have 2 transactions with 200, the login and create account. So we want to analyze, we can add here or in whatever node, say, okay, request, sign. So if it matches the sign for the sign in, right, Dynatrace is giving us the span. So this is the span that where we created an account with a 200 response time, right? And showing us the inter-tier time of all these spans, right? So, and now what we're gonna do, I call it, maybe you have seen the movie Inception, where you can just like navigate and dive into it. So I think of it like as an inception. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna navigate in the code. I'm gonna click here and say, show me the response time hotspots. So we are now on the engine X, right? It's showing us 11.5 milliseconds. This is only 1 span. If we have hundreds of transactions or a load test like with a key user action, we're gonna see the distribution of all these transactions. And it's letting us know, hey, in engine X, this millisecond, not even 1 millisecond, is in modules on internals, no database usage, but you're using your time in other service. And this is the sign-in user of the Easy Travel service, right? So if I click on the filter, what is gonna happen? We're gonna jump into the next service. So now we're in the Easy Travel service, where the response time now adapted to 10.5 milliseconds. It's letting us know, hey, you have some code execution here. This will be the Java code. If we were in a .NET, this is .NET code, PHP, and so on and so forth. And interaction with other queues, which is only 1 call to the add new user, right? And it's even letting us know, hey, these are the top findings. For the 10 milliseconds, 6 milliseconds is in this method and 4 in code execution, right? So think about it, you have a load test and you can see exactly what to optimize and where to optimize. Now we're gonna jump into add new user. And now we are on the next service. Remember this really simple service flow? Now we're on the authentication service. See the change of filters, how automatically it adapted itself. Now in the authentication service per span, we're taking 4 milliseconds, right? This is the database usage and it's showing us the SQLs and the service execution, right? So the code that makes the transaction and the database usage, right? You see the transactions and you can get all the details of these transactions, okay? So, but we got to transaction, one creation, one that was successfully created and one that it wasn't, right? So for that, where is my, let me just go back and show you, because we know that we have one 200 and one 400. So in a way, a better way to understand it, if we show the PurePath, right? Again, we have filters. So if I take the 200 and apply it, we have the to sign in, 403, 200, right? I know I'm clicking too fast, but you have everything on the code lab. So looking at the time, we're good on time. We have 14 minutes. So let me just show the difference between why we got a 403, right? So I'm gonna open and use the screen to open the PurePaths in 2 windows. Right. So if you take a visual representation, these are the spans. So in every node that I click, I get the modules. So I click on the reverse proxy, on the Tomcat, I get the methods inside the Tomcat, right? If I click on the select statement, I get the data, right? So if we take a look at the 2 transactions, by the way, this is the request attribute, which is an HTTP header, but you can get as well return values, complex objects, whatever you have running your code without code modification, right? Dynatrace can get it with a configuration. You just let them know which method, which argument, and you're gonna get that data. So we see here that the one that was successful, insert into login user. And we don't have an insert, we have an exception, and we don't have an insert. Why is that? Well, before to create an account, the developer is sending a select statement and it's like, hey, do you have this user in your database? Returning 0 rows. It's like, okay, so I'm gonna create one. There is the insert one. And in this one, it's like, do you have this user? Yes, I do. This is why there is no insert statement. And this is out of the box. There is no configuration here, just the developer header, right? Just the header, so we can find this span easily because the span are there. But with the header, it's really easy for you and all your developers to find it in on real time. Right? So, and if the time allows, how are we with time, Andy?
Well, you have, I would say, about 5 to 6 minutes left, and then we want to make sure we have a couple of more minutes on open Q&A.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then we're really good on time. So now what I'm gonna show is the service flow a bit more complex, not that much. So if I take the sign away, this is the login, right? The login, and I'm gonna show the PurePath. This PurePath is a bit more complicated, right? So we get the PurePath, we get the login, so you get all this information. Look at this, all this metadata, right? All this metadata is for you on each service. So this can be microservices and pods communicating to each other, and you can see exactly the metadata and the request, even the content type. We're seeing this is a SOAP XML, right? Getting the full name, all this information and the code level for each of these methods, right? And this is the data that is stored and captured automatically for all your spans, right? So a way to understand also this flow, well, first we had this nice representation here, right? Where we can see CPU, other network, disk, or locking time, right? But we have also the possibility to say, hey, show me the response time hotspot. Meaning we're gonna navigate again. Remember the flow? Oh, by the way, I didn't even show the flow, right? So let me just show the flow. Yeah. So remember this, we see 22 milliseconds, one transaction calls one time the easy travel service, and the easy travel service calls 4 times authentication service and 1 time verification service. And the authentication service calls 1.8 times per average the database, meaning we have 7 database calls in altogether, and this is only one span, right? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna jump into this span and navigate it within the service. So the time is one span. We see the time here. If we were to have multiple spans, like a load test, you're gonna see all the transactions. Really good for optimizing. If you want to optimize the code on a login or any feature or any technology that you have, this is a great place to start. So we're on the Nginx. This is why it's showing us the modules, right? The modules and the internals. We have no database usage, and it's still letting us know it's calling one time to log in. So we jump into the next service, right? So this service is letting us know, hey, Easy Travel is calling 5 times other services. The authentication service 4 times, which, by the way, 1 time authenticate, get full name, get user role, get loyalty status. And by the way, the blue line that you see here, it has a purpose. We see the authenticate from these calls takes the most time from all the others, right? Almost as double as get loyalty status. If I click on authenticate, it's showing us 6.8 milliseconds, right? And the loyalty status 2.6 milliseconds. Look how powerful that is, right? And this is just one span, right? So, and I can say, I want to jump and filter into this service and see all the 4 methods, right? And it's going to show us then the database of all the methods, or just jump into one of these and filter one method within one service, right? So let's use the other one. Let's say I want to go into the authentication service and filter all these methods, right? On average per span, because now we have more spans, you see, because those are the inter-tier calls. So now we see the 4 different calls with the different timing of each call, the database usage, the service execution, right? And the different select statements and commits, right? Really, really powerful. So with this, I say I will conclude episode 1, because this is very important, guys, to understand how the change of filters works, right? Because now I'm gonna use the time, okay, to make some marketing. Well, not marketing, but try it, please. If you don't believe me, you can spin a tenant, meaning on our cloud, you're gonna get automatically a tenant. We create them automatically. You don't even need to put credit card or anything, maybe just some email that says like, hey, do you wanna get in contact with us? And that's it. So you download the agent and you can do the code lab. And I want to show, okay, these are the code labs and all the steps that I went today, right? And I wanna make a teaser for what we learned in episode 1, right? Is part of episode 2 and is gonna build on episode 3 and episode 4. So if I go to the agenda, right, here, let me just actually put it here on a bigger scale. We're gonna learn, okay, today we learn to work with diagnostic tools, with developer feedback and focus. And we really, I hope we got the understanding how powerful the PurePath is, the spans that we get CPU, sync time, log time, SQLs, all that data automatically, regardless of if you're running Java, .NET, PHP, or whatever. And once we learn how to find this transaction, how to filter, the next episode, we're gonna focus on quality gates. We want that you focus on innovating and you don't have to wait for manual load test, because with load test is how you get really optimization potential. You don't want is where you need the application the most is where it's under load. So load test is really important, and we're gonna give you some best practices on load testing, how to compare load test, how to add load test performance as a service, right? That you can have a JMeter file, and this load test is gonna be triggered automatically on every merge, meaning hopefully the idea is that you have a pipeline, a Git repository. When you do a merge or a commit in a pipeline, automatically will trigger a build. It will deploy this new release. It will load test it. And with Dynatrace and Captain, we're gonna compare the releases automatically, and based on best practices and SLIs and SLOs, we're gonna teach you what that is. you can compare and evaluate the whole full stack with the power of the traces and the full stack, the process information, architectural information, business information, the amount of money that you're transferring, whatever the application is doing, we can validate that automatically, right? And if something bad happens, you have a problem in your code, it will stop automatically with the intelligent quality gate. That's the idea. And we're gonna show you in episode 3 and episode 4 how to compare and find that bug that you introduced or someone else introduced into the software, right? So you have a bulletproof system for your pipeline. That's the idea. And in every episode, we're gonna start giving you goodies, meaning we're giving you code, Monaco files, shell files, so you can apply this as the same environment. So you see there is no magic, there are no tricks, everything is true, nice, well done software. And hopefully you apply it to your environment. Yeah.
This is really phenomenal. And I can just, Gustavo also said, crystal clear, Sergio, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the stuff that you put together. And I know there's so much more there to come, especially because you will then focus more and more on automation. I tried to answer all the questions that came in the meantime. So folks, the way I answered them in Q&A, I think you should have seen all of my answers. Some questions were regarding what type of technologies do we support. Some questions were around overhead of the one agent. Then there were questions around certain technologies, as I mentioned. Yeah, what if you don't see something, right? Exactly. Yeah. There was one that came in and said, hey, what if I don't see things for my custom C# applications? Mm-hmm. I've explained if something is very fast, we don't necessarily always capture method level information. We capture it in case there's hotspots. We also capture it in case there are any request attributes defined. If you have questions, I see Steve, you raised your hand. Please put questions into the Q&A feature. Episode 2, we will soon announce when it is, right? We have a schedule. I run other performance clinics too and other topics, but I'm pretty sure we'll have episode 2 coming up soon.
Soon, yeah.
Stay tuned. Steve, as I said, if you have a question, please use the Q&A feature so you can, our license usage. You want to quickly talk about license?
I can really quick about license. If you use the trial, there's first no licensing. The licensing works based on host units. Basically, for the features that we show, is based on host units, right? A host unit is measured by the, by the way, showing is always better than explaining. So if you go to our page, this is the help page, the supports and technologies, you can see all the ones that we support. And if I type license, monitoring consumption, I think this will be the best license, right? So the license is based on host units, right? Meaning we don't care about the technology. You can have a Kubernetes cluster and you can have hundreds of different technologies. We just measure the run, right? Because we hope that you can size your worker nodes properly, and it's only the memory that is allocated to the agents or whatever we're monitoring, right? So this is how we charge for the licensing. And then we have something called DDUs, Davis data units, which is the Davis computing power. If you enhance it, for example, with metrics that you're putting from the outside, let's say, and you have a bundle, so you can read here because we have a bundle. Let's say we give you free data units for an amount of host units that you buy. But if you get over it because you want to leverage the Davis AI, then we charge for the Davis data units, right? The same for real user monitoring. If you don't have real user monitoring, then there is nothing there to charge. But if you're using real user monitoring, like session replay and where your users are clicking, where you are clicking, right? We charge per session, right? And those are units. You have a budget and you can use it dynamically as you want. Yeah.
There's more questions that I just one that I answered on, why don't we capture every single method all the time? because as we said, you can tell Dynatrace to capture methods if you specify request attributes, but in general, Dynatrace, as Sergio, as you said in the beginning, we are also built for hyperscale. So we have customers that run these on thousands of hosts, millions of microservices. And if in 80, 90, 95% of the cases, everything is crystal clear and works perfectly, there is no need to capture every single method.
Exactly.
But if there are particular methods that are very important for you, then you can obviously tell us that we should capture it.
Exactly. And we encourage to capture atomic methods. Like, let's say you have a method that is only triggered once per transaction, right? And you have the account number. So that's really a good use case to capture the account number, so you can have business KPIs based out of it. So you can measure the performance and with the account numbers or the adoption of your product or whatever you're building, right? But it's not a good best practice, because we can capture all the methods. Why would you? Right. This is why we have also in the request attributes, you can filter by managed zone, you can filter by tag and say, I want to capture more on staging or development environment, but not on production. Only that what I need. Right.
So I think that one user is coming back that they're still missing some PurePaths, even though they have high availability. I guess that's what you mean, defined. At some point, we have a capability in the one agent that is called overhead protection. Right?
Adaptive load reduction.
Adaptive load reduction, exactly. So we obviously in the end want to make sure that we're not impacting your critical systems.
Absolutely. It's actually just a sizing matter. You can and we can configure the amount of traces of spans per process instance, meaning per container or process, right? We can limit it because we don't want that because of monitoring purposes, we increase some overhead or make the application not work as it should be, right? This is why Dynatrace protects your processes and protect itself. So the cluster has also a protection mechanism, which is just a sizing matter. You need to add more CPU, more memory, so you can either to your process or to the cluster.
Exactly. And I'm not sure who, I mean, I know you are on Anonymous here. If you want to follow up with your specific thing, use case, it seems you are obviously a Dynatrace customer. I suggest reach out to your Dynatrace One team, right? In your Dynatrace UI, you can click on the chat, you get directly connected to your Dynatrace One team, and they can then help you with proper sizing so that this is not a problem anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. And any other questions, feedback, reach out to us because we're really interested. And if we are not covering your use cases, also let us know as a developer, what do you want to learn or how do you think we can make better software? Because that's what we're here for.
And if there are more questions later on, you have our names. As I said earlier, we have all the same email format, firstname.lastname@dynatrace.com. You'll find us on social media, you'll find us on LinkedIn. The credits for this session goes 99.99% to Sergio.
No.
Even I learned a lot of cool things. I didn't even know that in the service flow where you or in your diagnostic views where you added always like you went to the next level with the filter option. That's really great. There's a lot of cool new things that came into the MDA, into the multidimensional analysis view. It's amazing what you did with Monaco. So Monaco stands for monitoring as code, allows us to automatically configure Dynatrace exactly the way that you wanted to configure there.
I'm just gonna give a teaser so keep you all a bit more in the next session. If I click, let me just switch. This is the load testing environment already integrated where we can see load tests coming in, and we're gonna work here. We get the test steps, business KPIs, everything automatic. We have synthetic tests. We're gonna learn on the next episode how to test your application internally, externally with either a REST services or full browser, right? So stay tuned because we're gonna build our knowledge and make better software faster.
One question just came in. Which version of Dynatrace are you running here? I guess you're running
212, the latest. It's a production managed cluster.
Yeah, so 212. All the features that Sergio has shown today is all available for everyone already.
There is no EAP. Everything is prod.
Yeah. And I see that, Steve, you have still raised your hand. If you still have a question, let me know through the Q&A window. Unless you want me to unmute yourself, then you can. I can unmute you as well, and you can talk if you want to. If this is more helpful, just let me know. Other than that, I think we've answered this. We've ended a lot of kudos, a lot of this is a great session. So thank you. So, I mean, Sergio, you're doing
awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah,
and we're looking forward to more. And as we said, this is recorded. The recording will soon be up on university.dynatrace.com and also on the YouTube playlist for the other performance clinics. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you see the power of Dynatrace, especially as shown today in the help of developers, their day-to-day work. I know we are in engineering now, you know, also on a lot of shared environments, meaning not only on your workstation where you work, you can also install the one agent there and automatically get everything monitored. But also if you have shared Kubernetes environments or shared environments where you deploy to, the stuff that you showed with the HTTP headers, this is great because then you can easily find exactly what you're interested in. Yeah. The next session, we will announce the next session soon, so stay tuned. All the recording, all the webinars, I will post the link again. So on this page here, I'll post it into the chat window so that everyone can see it. So in chat, I'll say to all, find upcoming perf clinics. These are here. And then the recordings will be made available on 2 locations, and check the chat window again. On the one side, university.dynatrace.com, there's a section under Dynatrace and then webinars. And we also have a public YouTube playlist, and you can get to this playlist through that short link.
And we're gonna link the video with the episodes.
Exactly, yeah, you will also put it in here once the video is uploaded.
So you can do the steps and yeah. So when we release episode 2, I believe some of you already have clicked in here, you get an abstract, what we're gonna learn. And yeah, and more goodies are coming because we want that you are able to follow the steps and click through the same that we are clicking.
Good. Sergio, with this, I know it is, if it wouldn't be COVID, it would be beer garden time. But at least yes. It's sunny finally in our part of the world. And so let's enjoy the evening for us at least.
Absolutely.
Everybody
Thank you
else,
very much, Andy.
Yeah. Stay safe, stay healthy. See you soon.
Yeah. Be like Docker.
Yeah.
Isolate yourself.
Exactly. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.